Hello everyone, and just want to welcome everyone to today's lecture. What we're going to be doing today is we're going to go into a completely new topic, which is going to get into blend shapes. Now this is going to be the technique that we're going to be using to basically make our facial expressions. They're very similar to what we were using back last semester, technically last year, when we were working with those pre-made characters. Basically, we go to the shape editor and we're able to make adjustments and changes over there. Now for our purposes today, we're not going to do quite as many facial expressions, so you don't have to worry about that. But I want to first show how to do it on some simple objects first, and then we'll get right into working with the actual character, his or herself. Now, when we're getting into this, besides the facial expressions over here, we're also going to get into a little bit of skinning for the last parts. Now, I'm not going to go over every single little nook and cranny, but at least can show everyone how to get started, some tips and tricks, and a couple things to kind of watch out for should those elements come up. But that's going to be pretty much the long and short of it. Basically, anything that we need to do to make the character animatable, we're going to fix up and wrap that up today. Now, for this, we're also going to take a moment to basically skin anything that doesn't need to be skinned yet. Now, the only thing I told you not to skin at this point was the head. And again, when you're doing this for the assignment, because the assignment is wrapping everything up, making your blend shapes, we'll get back to this in a sec. Skin whatever still needs to be skinned. And again, do the head last. Under no circumstances should you skin the head until the blend shapes are done. Anything else, like for example, if you want to do the arms, the upper body, and whatnot, you're free to do those, but just avoid doing the head until the very last thing. There is a reason for this. Now, in terms of the facial expressions I'm looking for one that has an open mouth, one that has a closed mouth, one that has the lips going back a little bit or an E mouth, lips going ooh or an ooh mouth, eyebrows up, eyebrows down, smile, and frown. So that's going to be 8 facial expressions right there. Although, I would recommend for at least the elements for the eyebrows up, eyebrows down, smile, and frown, that you do those elements separately. The reason I'd recommend doing those separately, if possible, keyword is if possible, is because if you are able to put those in separately, you could add a little bit of an offset between each side of your face. It will make your facial expressions look a little bit easier. That being said, I won't blame anyone who does both sides at the same time, but you're going to need 8 facial expressions and finishing up the skinning. So you're going to be pretty busy today. But again, if done correctly, it will be worth it. Now the good news is, after this week, we're going to be focusing most of our efforts on doing animation. So I wouldn't have to worry too much about any of the more technical elements later on, as hopefully this will be enough. Okay, so with that, let's take a look at Maya. And as stated, I'm just going to get rid of the outliner here for a moment. We're going to be focusing our efforts on learning the basics on how the blend shapes work. Okay, so just going to get this in place. So at least to get started, before you actually try the real thing, I would strongly recommend that you have like a free shape that you can experiment with. In this case, a sphere should be more than sufficient. Now, once that's done, I would also recommend deleting your history. This will get you more in tune to what's going to need to be done at a later time. So I'm going to go to Edit, Delete by Type, History. In other words, there should be nothing here except for maybe the name of your layer. But since just to be safe, I'm going to put a layer here so you could get an idea for this. Okay, cool. Now, when you're doing the blend shapes, it's a wise decision to copy from the original, at least to get started. So again, if you hit Shift D or Control D or just Edit and Duplicate, it should make a copy automatically. And then from here, I'm just going to make a bunch of copies in this case. So basically hit Shift D. Going to hit Control D. I'm sorry. Yep, there we are. And I'm going to make 4 more copies. And yeah, there we are. And each of these is going to have a different shape to them. So I'll leave it up to you what you want to name these for the practice. So I'm actually going to change the shape first to see what I do with this. Okay. So what I'm talking about when I'm talking about making facial expressions with the shape that are copied from the original is you're going to use the vertices. And I'm actually going to make sure I have my modeling toolkit when I'm doing this, because I'm going to have my symmetry on for this. Oop. Looks like I have this copied the wrong way, but that's all right. Okay, let's try maybe Z. There we are. It looks like a little bit of soft selection can help as well. But whatever method you choose, just make sure that if you want the other side to be affected as well, that you change those areas immediately. So, yep, there we are. Okay, now, important little safety tip to remember. Now, I'm just doing random shape changes just so I can show how this is done. But make sure that you only move vertices, edges, or faces. Under no circumstances do you add anything. So no extruding, so definitely no extruding, no smoothing, absolutely neither of the two, and no cutting, nothing. It absolutely must be the same mesh in every way, shape, or form. If you add more geometry, it is going to give you problems. So again, I'm just adding different shapes for each of these. Again, if you add any geometry, this will not work properly, and that will definitely not help. So I'm just changing the geometry, or at least the shape of the geometry, a little different with each one. Yeah, there we go. And now what I can do, now that I have all those, is I could take this moved information and I could basically put it onto this. Now, just bear in mind, when you're making these copies and so on, under no circumstances should you move in the vertex mode anywhere like that. The pivot point has to be exactly the same for each of these, or it is going to have problems. But once you've actually made the shape using the vertices, faces, or edges, we're going to go into the rigging section. There should be an area called the form, and this is going to be where a majority of the blend shape information is going to be. So that is something to kind of keep in mind with that. So, and again, the blend shape can actually be found right over here. Let's just take a look if there is any other information that you might find useful. Ah, yes. Also note that besides the blend shape over here, there's a little section called Edit Blend Shapes. We're going to get back to this, but do keep these two sections in mind. Okay, so what we're going to do to actually make the controllers work on our little ball over here, you're going to select all the facial, well, not so much all the facial expressions, but you're going to select 4 of the 6 facial expressions. There is a reason why we're doing it this way. I'm going to first show everyone how to add or make the whole blend shape process, and then, should you need to add facial expressions later, how to do that. So, I'm just clicking and dragging the first 4, holding Shift, select the actual head itself. Then, once that's done, and again, the main head is done this way, you're going to go to, let's see here, the form, blend shape. I would recommend hitting the settings box. The form, blend shape, settings box. The reason why I recommend hitting the settings box is you can give this a name. And I could call this facial shapes. That would be it. And yeah, just make sure everything else is still the same. The origins are on the local. Check topology. Envelope is exactly the same. And you hit create. Now, if everything works the way it's supposed to, I should be able to actually change the facial expressions in one of two ways. I could either go to the facial expression over here, and I basically can change this name, or sorry, this with relative ease. And by the way, the way I'm doing this is I'm selecting the actual text, and in this area I'm using the middle mouse button to go back and forth. And by the way, you can actually do all these elements together. It is going to be a little weird, but it is doable. So that just looks odd, but that's okay because this is just from practice. So once again, to basically get the whole process started, you're going to select your shapes. Now, ideally, you want to select all the shapes that you have, but let's say that these two were made at a different time. Well, these could be added in later, which I'm going to show in momentarily. So once these four are selected, I'm going to select the shape itself. I'm going to go to Deform, Blend Shape, hit the settings box. Then you give it a name. Make sure that check topology is still on. Looks like everything's good. You hit Apply or Create, and you should be able to see everything in your input area here and whatever name you gave it. Now, the other place you can see this, and it's going to be a little easier to key, by the way, is if you go to the Windows section, Animation Editors, and go to Shape Editor, you can see all the different facial expressions over here as well. And you might find it might be a little easier to make your changes. Oh, also something to note, you don't necessarily need to have everything at its fullest amount. In some cases, that might actually not be a bad thing. So maybe I'll put this halfway, put this maybe halfway, put this most of the way, and the eyes, yeah, that's definitely going to stay all the way. And that's how we can add that in. Okay, so that's step one. Now, if I want to add more faces to this, that's actually not too difficult to do. You select the head of choice, then you select the actual head itself. Then you go to, once again, Deform. But instead of going to the blend shape, because technically you could add another blend shape for this, but let's say that we want to add to our facial shapes instead, which is probably a better way to go. It'll keep it a little bit better organized. I can go to nonlinear. Oh, not linear. Sorry about that. Let's see. There we go. The blend shape area over here, and add, and the settings box. The setting box is very important. You'll see why in a moment. So I'll do that whole process one more time. Deform, blend shape, add, and hit the settings box. That part is key. Now, it's going to ask where do you want to put it. I would strongly recommend selecting the specified node. And yeah, if there's a little drop down over here, it'll ask what node do you want to put it on. And you could just put in the facial shapes like we have right now. And if you want to see it in real time, you can go to the animation editor, shape editor again. And yep, once I hit the apply and close, you'll see the facial expression come up immediately. So now I can give my little weird design a chin by just basically bringing that out. So we didn't have that before, but we got it now, and it definitely helps us with our process. So give that a try if you can. If you want to see it one more time, since I have to add the last one anyways, I'll show you one more time. So if you want to add in an extra face after you've already done the blend shapes, because there's going to be some cases where we're only going to be doing about 8 to maybe 12 different facial expressions now. But if any of you remember some of the stuff we saw last semester, those characters provided for you before basically had well into the double digits. I think one of them actually had 30 different facial expressions. So 12 is a good start, but if you want more, you have the option to add more using this little trick. So once again, you select what face you want first. In terms of the change, then the actual place you're going to be putting said face. You're going to go to Deform, going to go down your list to Blend Shape, go to Add. Make sure you hit the settings box, that part's important. Specify node and put it into where you need it to be. In this case, it's going to be facial shapes. And you just hit apply or apply and close, and it'll come immediately. And yeah, there it is. Later on, we can use the key option over here, or alternatively, we potentially could select these areas, right-click, and we potentially could key select it here if that's the route that we want to go. And of course, if you know what keys you're on, you could always right-click, and you should be able to delete selected instead, which we can, to get rid of the keys that are necessary. Got to be a little careful with that, but at least it's possible to do. And but this is the reason why I strongly recommend everyone deleting their history. Not only does it leave it open for weirdness to happen, but imagine having every single extrude, cut, and everything else over here as well, and you're basically trying to fight with it. It does not end well at all. So, in short, delete your history before going to this. Then once the actual blend shapes are done, you can actually go back to the skinning process. So let's see, we got about 16 minutes in. Why don't we take a quick break, and I'm going to make a second video that's going to focus our efforts specifically on facial expressions so that we can basically get that running. So take your break, and we'll come back very shortly.